Thank you so much, Justin and Brad, for joining me today. We have Justin and Brad from Timaru District Council, and they're here to talk to us about the LIM system project that they've been working on with Squiz. So just to kick things off, I'd love to hear from you both. Who are you? What do you do? And what are your roles at Timaru District Council?
I'll kick off. My name's Justin Bagust. I'm the Chief Information Officer and also co-president of Algam. So we look after all the digital loveliness that council has. And then Brad below is my dev team lead. Brad?
I'm Brad Reeve, the development team lead here. I've been here about 15 years now, doing all sorts of goodies end-to-end in the IT space. These days, more with information and systems and tying systems together and that kind of stuff.
Lovely stuff. Thank you so much. So I guess before we dive into the project itself, for anyone who's watching this and has no idea what a LIM system actually is, could you give us a quick overview of what it is and what it really entails, what's required of a council when they have a request for a LIM report?
Yeah, so basically, if you're going to buy a house, you'll often request a LIM. And so that's a copy basically of all the information council would have about the property that you're looking at. So it would contain any building consents, resource consents. It could have diagrams of your house layout and plans, drainage maps, and what your property boundaries look like, parcel information, rating information, any hazards or any other, basically anything that council has in terms of information about your property would be included in a LIM, and it all gets verified to make sure that it's all as accurate as possible. So that's, definitely used by real estate agents quite a bit. And as a piece of information, it touches every part of council, because it's quite a lot of information and a lot of systems that this information sits in. So yes, we figured that if we could get this right in terms of digitizing and automating this process, nothing would be impossible.
And does the data that could be added to a LIM keep growing and evolving over time? Is it a kind of set portion of data that you're always going to be looking at?
It does change. I think when me and Brad were showing it or talking about it with one of our planning managers, they said, oh, this new requirement's come in and we need to show some extra data or an extra layer in GeoMap. And the way Brad's designed it, and he can talk about that, was that it is very easy to add in a wee section and it pulls the information from a GIS layer, and there it is.
I'd love to hear about that. But actually first, I'd love to hear about is how you were previously approaching this. So what did your LIM system that you are saying goodbye to now look like? And I guess what were the challenges with that, the sort of catalyst for wanting to find a better way to do it?
Yeah, so we've got this legacy code base written by the previous CIO that did its job at the original time, but through the years stuff changed and it's quite difficult to wrap your head around what's going on there. So any sort of change you make, you're a little bit hesitant because you don't really know or if you're going to fit something else elsewhere or you're going to break something, that kind of thing. Any sort of complex change is more difficult again. So if you've got a new piece of legislation showing up that says you're going to improve ABC, that can be quite a challenge. And so staff have resorted to manually tackling all of those things. So they're emailing clauses around through email, they're adding in random attachments, loose sheets of paper. We don't really have a digital algorithm at the moment. So a big stack of paper gets handed to someone and they'll assemble the LIM by hand. They'll order it and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's a very manual process that's sort of only doing 50% of what we need.
Yeah, it's a lot of manual handling, a lot of potential for human error by the sounds of it. And presumably a lot of data that is either outdated or living in people's heads that they're just chucking in as they think it's right. And this is stuff that people are relying on when they're buying a house. So it's pretty important that it's right, presumably.
There's a lot of stuff that's kind of not necessarily coming from a source bit of data that's in the correct place in the system. They might find something on there that says, oh, you should be aware of this. So they'll set that into a LIM by emailing it to someone. The system isn't updated with that information, so it's not really captured long term. To say that LIM gets repeated again in a couple of months and someone else is processing it, potentially if they miss that same statement, then that random bit of paper, that clause will not be in that second LIM, which definitely should be. So there's a lot of risk of that kind of stuff happening just through change of staff, and because of all these little custom things that people are aware of, that sort of gets diluted as staff leave and new ones come in, but they'll pass on 80% of their knowledge. Things get lost over time. Yeah, definitely a lot of risk around just human error and passing knowledge on.
Yeah, I think that was one of the factors that got us thinking about it was the data quality issue. And Brad pointed it out there quite well. That say if you're editing the end product rather than going back to the source and making sure the source is correct, they're putting in the correct bit of information right at the end. And who knows if that gets then added back in afterwards? Probably not. And so you end up having to have the subject matter expert at the customer service end doing all that collating and checking and so forth. rather than maybe being spread out a bit more amongst the departments.
Yeah, big visibility actually there too around people seeing what's actually in the limb. So if you're a department, you'll deliver your little piece and they'll go to their limb assembler. And then you'll probably never actually see the full document because they only exist right at the end when it's being assembled. But potentially, there's scenarios where one department will have one thing, another department will have another highly related thing. One that comes to mind is shared drains. So there's the drainage and water department and the building department. Often they'll have related data, not necessarily the same, but it's suggesting similar or different things. And without someone seeing both those things at the same time, they can't identify that conflict. So that would only happen by the customer service agent at the end. And they're not drainage and water expert or anything. They're just assuming lumps. So there's a lot of responsibility that's fallen to them that shouldn't really be their problem.
And so I know you're through the process of transitioning from one to the other at the moment and testing the two side by side. What in your eyes would success look like? So there's a number of challenges in terms of the number of man hours it's currently taking, the quality of the data. What would be the kind of top 3 or 4 success factors that you think, yeah, that was worth the time and effort, we've nailed it?
Yeah, so for me, our goal was we wanted the limbs to go out really quick. So rather than say 7 to 8 day being when the limbs finally finished being processed and is collated and being handed out, we wanted the ability to be able to have that done in 2 or 3 days at the most. If everything's running smoothly and everyone gets onto it, you could knock out a limb in a single day, easy peasy. But obviously, the scheduling and time things. The other thing was the ownership of data. We wanted to push the ownership of data and the responsibility of that back onto the units themselves. With the new system, you can't edit the end result. You've got to go back and fix the source, and then it repulls back through into your end result. And so that way the data is being cleansed as it's being looked at and corrected, so that next time if the limb gets run, we know you're going to get exactly the same result.
One of the big ones, so making it super easy for staff to deal with, so they're not having to bring out between a whole bunch of systems, really having it all doable within one interface, highly desirable goal.
Also that visibility, like as a manager and from the management point of view, we wanted a lot more visibility into where things were at. And so now they've got a nice front page and a nice status page, and you can see where all the limbs are at. You can see if there's a department that maybe is under-resourced and so isn't able to get on and process things, suddenly that pops up to the top. And so it gives management a lot better visibility of how long it takes to process stuff and where things are at and if there's any bottlenecks, which is good.
And so I know you've worked with Squiz for a number of years. How did this particular project kick off? What was the starting point, and what was the journey that you took from that point forward?
There's been a bit of a long-run project through various things. But yeah, we did a big redevelopment, which we quite enjoyed and appreciated, and was really a great outcome at the end of it. Sort of thought for this limb, if you take a similar approach, really good. So we did some wonderful UXE type BA work with the Squiz team to key down what they're doing at the moment, work out how we can approach it going forward with a few little ideas. We want to steer that, but knowing from a UX point of view, sort of where that was going was awesome.
And then did you hit any roadblocks when you were initially planning it? So you said that was the kind of early stage. What was the kind of, I guess, the tipping point where it went from being something that's a nice idea to this is feasible? And were there hurdles in between those 2 points?
I think probably the main difficulty we had was selling the idea to management at the time. We'd often get pulled away onto other projects that were deemed more important at the time, rightly or wrongly. Just keeping that traction going, because it's such a massive project, is probably one of the main difficulties.
Yeah, because we've been working on this for quite a few years, and we sat down, me and Brad, and had a reasonably clear vision in terms of what we wanted to achieve digitally. And then we've created quite a few PowerPoints and presentations, and we've had a lot of different managers and group managers over us over the last 2 or 3 years, probably more than usual. And that's where you've got to re-justify yourself and re-justify the project and its priority. And as soon as management or whoever was coming in saw that, they're like, wow, this sounds really good. And then would get back on track again. So was a little bit, the development side of things was a little bit stop-starty for that, which was super frustrating for Brad's team. He's doing very well to be smiling now. So hats off to him and his team.
Coming out the other side of it. And what about from a tech perspective?
Yeah, it definitely challenges the main ERP, to pull quality data from that. We had the call to utilize like GIS quite heavily. There's a lot of data that's attached to properties, and it's indicator of some spatial property, like it's near a stop bank, and that's manually recorded against properties at the moment, but that's not really robust when it comes to subdivision. If you have a huge farm, it says this farm's near a stop bank, and they subdivide off like a tiny wee piece of the farm miles away from the stop bank. they'll probably still say on that little piece that, oh, hey, it's never stopped back, just because someone's thought, oh yeah, I've got to move this over. Whereas if you do it with GIS, then it's very much spaces, like you say, is this geography 300 meters away from stop back kind of thing. So it's quite a big chunk of the planning department's data is from GIS now, rather than authority where it was previously. We've got our records management system in there, we've got our scanned building records and digitized files from way back in the day. Often they'll get included. So there's a lot of tech stuff to bring that together. So we've made a back-end service there to deal with a lot of that. So it goes off for a limb. It will specify the property we're interested in. It'll go away and check out a whole bunch of bits and pieces. I think we worked out between 100 200 objects per parcel of land. So this could be any number of those on a particular property. We check that out, bring it all back, and then hand it over to the limb front end to kind of format that up as needed. So we built most of that with .NET and using OpenShift.
And I understand that Squiz Data Store came about as you were working on the early days of the project. Can you explain how that changed things in terms of being able to take the project forward?
Yeah, so without that, we really would have been dead in the water. I had to do a pretty major development internally. So we started the project before Data Store, and we were just using a matrix at that point. And for each limb, there's like a number of clauses attached to it. And we called those modules of the project. And we created those in matrix. So for each limb, we'd generate these 80 modules or however many. We didn't know how many at the time, but we're thinking upwards of 100 potentially. Then through using the system, we had multiple limbs and we had each with 100 modules. So just as we were coming into that problem, the Data Store announced, pulled out all the old matrix stuff and shifted to Data Store. And it was night and day. So we were going from literally minutes to load the initial screen down to 1 or 2 seconds. And that's held up really well going forward. We've been heavily hitting it in the last 6 months and it doesn't seem to slow down yet. There's a huge success rate as far as performance goes and just ease of storing that data. Like,
how did you approach the project in terms of, obviously it's taken a while to get to where it is today, and was some of that deliberate in terms of building some parts and then testing them and going through sort of iteration phases and getting feedback loops internally? Was there that sort of structure to the rollout?
Probably one of the major times of work was just going to the units and just getting reading around what they were doing and currently works and what they needed to include and that kind of thing. That's quite difficult because there's a lot of, if you've got a run-of-the-mill urban property just with a house on it, the standard limb's pretty basic. But if you go out to the rural area and there's a very huge farm barn on it or something, suddenly it starts getting a bit more complicated and a lot of those things don't happen often. So you ask away about all these different things and they'll tell you what comes up, but then some randomly will come up and they're like, oh yeah, and we've got to think about these heritage buildings. So it took quite a few rounds of going back and forth just to get all the things we needed on those funny edge cases that you don't see often.
It must have been, quite an iterative approach then in light of that, because you have to just test things as they come up and people don't necessarily just hold all those different things in their head. In terms of actually looking at where you are now, what have been the main benefits or main results that you're seeing so far in terms of improvements to the system?
So we sort of did UAT and training the last couple of weeks, and we had an opportunity just yesterday, actually, one of our internal departments wanted 8 limbs for some council-owned property. So it was like, oh, we'll grab that and put that through a pilot, pre-prod type thing, and having everyone trained, but not quite live, and we held it over to them yesterday. And the departments that have been in so far are loving it. The building unit probably have the most change for anyone, just because they have probably the most complicated and largest areas of limits just through building consents and different construction that's happened over the years on properties and that kind of stuff. So their current section was pretty big, and they've got a huge checklist they go through at the moment. And their main process is a little bit flustered just through the significant sort of change and stuff that she had to deal with. But at the end, it was just like, oh, I feel like something's wrong because it can't be that fast. That's all. And yeah, she's wanting us to launch straight away, doesn't want to wait, doesn't want to go back. So that's really good indicator.
Yeah, definitely. And what are some of the key features that you're hearing so anecdotally that people are most impressed with or most happy to see in there as a change from the old system?
I think just being able to sit in that one screen and do everything, not hopping between screens. I think there's that simplicity of not having to go on this big hunt every time the limb comes in. That's all gone. And now it's just really, the data's presented to them. They just look at it and do it with a couple of little on it, make sure it's sane and sensible. And they just have to say, yeah, good, tick it off. I think that shift from manually collating stuff just to flying off is huge to them.
Yeah, so just to clarify, previously they would have gone away and found the data or taken the data out of their head, put it into the report, and then that would have been collated by someone else. So now you're saying the data is pulled in for them. They basically just have to verify it. So they have to go in, confirm that what's in there is correct, and it's there. They own that piece of data. They own that confirmation, and so they're responsible for making sure that's checked off, and therefore it's added to the report.
So we've split each piece into its own little block, and each of those blocks is owned by one department. And so they're responsible for signing that piece off. So they'll get presented with, say, their 10 blocks that they've got to deal with, and they know it's their responsibility to look at those 10. They'll check those 10 out. If the data that's been extracted is good, they can just tick it off and say, yep, approve that. If it's not, they can go into the source system, update what they need to update. We have helpful notes there saying this has come out because, so they know why it's displaying as it is. If they deem that incorrect, they can jump into the system, fix it up, resync the data, and then see that it's all corrected. Now, hopefully they're happy and they can just approve and sign it off and carry on. So yeah, there's far less sort of manual hunting around and that kind of stuff.
And you mentioned earlier that they couldn't previously see the final report until it was a final report. So they'd add their data and then they'd see nothing else until the final report was put together. Are they able to now track how the report's looking or what data has been in?
So the UI sort of presents that in a sort of long document format as they work. But in addition to that, they can hop over and hit a preview button and it'll generate a full PDF preview of how that document will work with its issue. And they can see in that preview that certain settings are signed off. You've got a very clear view of what that limb will look like and how far through the process it is at any point. You can start a limb and immediately get a preview within seconds in a draft state, at least what you might see at the end. You can have full visibility end to end now rather than having to wait right through to that final day.
And is it updated in real time as well? So if there were two people working on it at once, could they see the latest version regardless of the fact that someone else is in there updating?
Yeah, so we've got some cool WebSocket stuff happening there. So all the users connect into an essential sort of management API thing, and as they tick stuff off, all those updates get fed through to every other user. So everyone sees in real time what's been ticked off. That's also departments that might have two or more people working on the same limb, but also customer services who monitor the progress of the limbs can leave their dashboard open and see the pieces ticking away through the day. They'll just keep updating for them so they can see in real time when a limb's going to be done or if something's outstanding or hung or whatever, they'll see it there because it's not updating.
So obviously from an operational perspective, there's a huge amount of efficiency that's been added and a lot less man hours and a lot more kind of assurance in terms of the data quality. Justin, from your perspective, what does it mean for you from an organizational perspective that this system is now so much more efficient and so much more reliable? And I guess skipping forward to my next question, how can you see this being applied elsewhere in the organization that you might be able to add this efficiency beyond just the limb system?
Yeah, so I think when I started 10 years ago, I had a catchphrase of all systems online within 3 years. So Brad might remember that. It's 10 years later, we certainly haven't done that. But this is a big step in that direction. So I guess one is that it's taking a lot of the manual admin out of doing something. We digitized a lot of our data. We digitized all of our billing records. And so suddenly you've got all this digital data, you can do smart stuff with it. And this is us trying to do some smart stuff with it, right? Also, the way we built the system, we agreed that we wanted to build it as a platform. So we knew that this was probably the hardest one to get off, or hardest report to generate on this digital platform would be a limb. But because we've built all of the connectors into that data right across the system, we can reuse those. So if someone wants to do a registration form or they want to do a consent, later on we can see the system being used all over the place and automate other bits and pieces that are manual or paper or have an admin base to it. So we can really reuse the same digital platform again and again. And we also built it on a scale that we wanted to be able to have the option of sharing this even wider, so even outside of council, looking at other councils, maybe they want to do something with us and we can help them too. So that's been the view of it. But I guess the visibility is really cool. So it makes it a lot easier to have a talk with your management. If you can say hand on heart, all the other units have signed it off within 1 day and there's one unit here, it's taken them 4 days or 5 days to get to it. So you can say it's not a technology problem. It's not a problem with the other units here. Maybe it's a resourcing problem, or maybe they need to have a conversation with that team or whatever needs to happen. But it just adds that visibility and clarity of what's happening, and also that data ownership. So we're real big on the units owning their data. We're the custodians and the units own it, and now they can own it and they clean it. So they're tidying it up as they go along, which is always lovely.
Yes, it's nice to have that happening in the background. And then Brad mentioned that there was some skepticism around whether or not it's working because it's too fast. Have you heard anything like that as well from other stakeholders, so people who aren't necessarily using the system, but other stakeholders within the organisation who are aware that it's now up and running and interested in how it can possibly be this fast?
Yeah, I had a few of the group managers friendly poke me in the side and say, "Oh, it's too quick, it's too quick. It can't be that quick, that accurate." And I said, "Well, that's the whole point of it." So really, and that's I think where a big chunk of that savings is that it's the collating and the manual handling and all that stuff, all the admin side. That's not the brain power stuff. You want the people to be focusing on the really important: is the data correct? Does that look right? Is there something off about that, or do these two things match up? And so, you're freeing up staff to be concentrating on the right thing. And I think we'll see more of that. So we've got plans talking about a digital citizen portal, which we'll wait a little bit before we kick into that one. That's going to be another biggie.
Give Brad a bit of breathing space.
Give him a break. But we're getting, there's a lot of groundswell. I mean, even when Brad and Kate were going through the different teams and showing them this and demoing it to them, we thought we'd have a few speed bumps and some roadblocks and a couple of naysayers, but people were really on board really fast, and everyone was really positive, and people we thought might be difficult really weren't. And so it's been, and I think that's a testament to the quality of work and scoping that Brad and Kate and Squiz have done with us. So there's been a lot of work gone into that, and a lot of thought about the UX and the user experience as well. So it's paying off.
What's your experience been of working with Squiz throughout the project? How's that kind of relationship worked, and where have Squiz come in to support you in areas where you've needed it?
I think in terms of a vendor, Squiz have been incredible. They're one of our favorite vendors to deal with. They've always been so good. Bounce ideas around with them. We prototype stuff and trial stuff out. And we're throwing our hands up when we get stuck with stuff, and we'll ask Kathy, she'll know someone. It's been an amazing journey, and they've been really awesome. You guys have been really awesome. And you're definitely one of my favorite vendors to her. Just the reliability and coming to the party, coming up with ideas, or finding an expert in the area and then leaving him at our disposal. So it's been awesome. If I had to say first impressions of Squiz, because we look back right when we did our first website, I wasn't there for the initial one, but straight after I started dealing with Squiz and with Kathy, and I remember I think stating exactly how much money we had to spend on a website, and it was quite tight in terms of the money that we're allowed to throw at this. And Squiz came back with some really good designs, and I was always questioning, like, you wouldn't want to tell your vendor exactly how much you've got to spend, right? Because they'll spend it all. And that's not what I found. I found Squiz to be very honest and very straight and upfront to deal with. And that really, I suppose that's been the start of a really good relationship where Squiz has just been partner in what we do. So it's been wonderful.
I think we look at as much as we need being on the project. Like some projects we're reasonably self-sufficient, others we need more of a hand on, and you guys are working there, so that's awesome.
And I guess just so from the people perspective, it sounds like we've become an extension of the team, which is great. And from a tech perspective, obviously this project is really reliant on tech working together really well, integrating really seamlessly. So we'd love to just hear a little bit about that tech stack. Like, how is that all working together? Love to hear how that's structured at the moment.
I think we didn't want to have too much interaction between our back-end systems and Magix itself. So we made this layer in between that sort of hides all the mess, all the crazy council stuff. We thought would make just a clean thing. We could talk to the LIM system, pull back all the property data. So we kind of really set out to kind of hide a lot of that complexity away from the front-end system. I think that worked really well, particularly with the LIM there. There's so many different things that you want to throw in the LIM, and those modules we talked about, all the blocks. They're delving into that data and pulling out a specific thing. So we didn't want to have all these models having to talk to different systems that they can carry on. That approach worked out quite nicely. The behind the scenes on that is, we had OpenShift running a whole lot of little services that we've built out just around accessing the priority and records management systems and doing document conversions. So this is like on the fly conversions from doc to PDF, that kind of stuff. Because didn't want to have to make a document viewer on the front end for every file type under the sun. I guess just simplifying as much as possible the back end stuff and presenting that simple version to the Squiz front end was one of the key things there.
And you mentioned a bit before, Justin, about the future plans and how you started to offer the system out for testing with other councils. You were saying there's a lot you could do in terms of the tech, in terms of using it in other areas of Timaru District Council. Have you got any specific examples you can share of that yet, where you're thinking you might start to try it out?
Yes, digital signing. We have a digital signing platform, a bit like what's behind DocuSign. So that whole platform sits in our server room downstairs, and so that's what's signing our LIMs. And so the intent is there that then every single document that we produce, we'll put through that signing system, and so we'll sign all of our outgoing PDFs and documents out to the public. And then that system is large enough that we could actually start signing other councils' documents if we wanted to too. So that's like a component of that platform. But the intent there is then that we've then got that digital signature on everything going out. So it's just a bonus. But also now we've got the platform there that auto scales. Brad's been quite clever with. I remember him showing me some of the bits and pieces. Some of that's totally out of my head, even though I'm a geek. He's the uber geek. And it auto scales up. So as it's consuming more resources and whatnot, more resources are made available to it. Service expands. And then as it's decreasing, it decreases down. It's really got good scalability. And Brad's been very careful about how he's written it and I suppose in the blobs, like taking that big blob of data and then massaging that into the information that we want. And so I can see that potentially we could take the system and then someone with a similar setup to us, like running authority, grabbing that blob might not be so hard and then using it. But then if you're grabbing it as a blob of data that you're massaging into what you need, so long as you knew where that data was in a different system, there's no reason why that you couldn't apply the same logic to that. So that might be, there'll be some trial and error in that, and we'll treat carefully. Obviously, we want to get ourselves using it 100% here and all happy, and the lawyers are ticking it off in terms of getting all the legalities right of the limbs going out the door. But yeah, we intend to digitize more of what we do internally, and so I suppose reduce that admin stuff as much as we can. Reduce that, and then once you've got those bits, it's all digitized and it can see everything. A citizen portal, for example, you could log in as a citizen and see everything about yourself that council knows about you, and then can talk to all parts of the council through that portal. So that's the vision.
I'm excited. As a New Zealand resident, I'll be looking forward to this popping up in my local council soon. But yeah, no, I think it all sounds fantastic, and it's obviously been a long project, but well worth all the work that's gone into it, and sounds like it's going down extremely well internally. Yeah, to the point where you're being questioned on whether or not it can possibly be real. And but yeah, just congratulations, guys. It's a fantastic project and one that we're really proud to have been involved in.